Welcome Sun Sect disciples. How are you all doing? So, today we have brought another story for you. Imagine being a ragged kid trapped in the slums, learning magic from a grumpy old man who claims to be an archmage but can barely cast a one-star spell. But the real chaos starts when I focus my mana, shatter all expectations, and materialize a brilliant glowing blue shovel that blasts straight into a tree. The old man was left in complete shock, sweating bullets at a commoner's talent. But just as I master the basics, a sudden, brutal tragedy hits, and a mysterious blue system window flashes right before my eyes, with a jaw-dropping secret about who I really am. To know what happens next, watch this complete video. Welcome to Ebelstein, guys. Just another bustling city where survival is the only rule that matters. There was this guy we called the Boastful Old Man. He lived in the slums, a shabby old guy who could cast one-star magic, but he went around boldly calling himself an archmage. His temper was so foul, he'd genuinely get furious at kids who were just playing harmless pranks on him. And then, there was me. I was just a ragged kid back then. I ended up learning magic from that grumpy old man. There was no grand reason for it. We just sat by the fire, him talking and me listening. He simply needed a follower, and I simply needed knowledge. Time passed like the falling snow. He'd watch me practice out in the woods, arms crossed and judging my every move. I focused, letting the raw mana flow through my small, trembling hands. He muttered in complete shock, "You've grasped the flow of mana?" My eyes snapped open, glowing with intense power. With a sharp burst of energy, I pushed the mana forward. A brilliant blue, glowing shovel materialized right before his eyes and shot rapidly across the grass, slamming into the tree with a heavy, explosive thud. I sat there panting, looking up at the damage I'd caused. The old man was completely speechless, sweating bullets as he stared at me. And so, while doing all sorts of chores for him, I became a one-star mage in just 1 year. It was late that night, back at our shabby tent. While drinking, he said, "Beyond the northern walls of Ebelstein, noble brats reach 3-star level." He handed me some stale bread, scoffing, "A lowborn like you with your common blood could train your whole life and still might never reach that level. So don't get too arrogant. Your pitiful talent will hit a wall at 2-star and give up." I just quietly chewed my bread as he kept ranting. "Magic is all about bloodline. No matter how hard you struggle, it's useless." He repeatedly told me about the insurmountable wall between nobles and commoners. Honestly, guys, I wondered if he harbored some longing for things he couldn't achieve himself. That night felt particularly long. The next day, a heavy storm rolled in. When I returned to our dwelling, I found him lying face down in the cold mud. The old man was dead. I stood there in the freezing rain, seeing that his entire body was covered in brutal bruises from some severe beating. Later, I found out that he had been beaten by the city guards. I made him a simple wooden cross, standing silently over his grave as the rain washed over me. The rumor was that he was caught trying to steal a 2-star magic book from the warehouse. People couldn't understand why an old man with no ambition did such a thing. Suddenly, a blue system window materialized right before my eyes, because I'm not even a person from this world. The system confirmed I had mastered magic basics, asking me to select my primary school. And so, 4 years passed. Enter Katia, Flameheart, the former mistress of the now fallen Viscount Flameheart family. A noble by birth, she was a 3-star mage, and many mercenary groups sought her out. While staying in Ebelstein, she took on work for the Belder Mercenary Company and graciously decided to teach me. I learned so many things from Katya as we read through advanced magic tomes together. One evening, at the Beldern's Tears Tavern, she sat across from me and said softly, "It's natural for any mage to have ambitions to rise higher. And Derek, as you know, you have that talent. But excessive greed will only delay your achievements," she warned. I just nodded respectfully. "Yes, I'll keep that in mind." She leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. "Now, close your eyes and feel the mana. Calmly sense where the mana originates, what flow it has, and think about manifesting what you imagine." I closed my eyes, focusing intensely as the blue aura surrounded my body. The heavy wooden chair beside me suddenly lifted off the ground, glowing vibrantly with my energy. She thought I'd definitely have a considerable amount of innate mana in my body. Maybe it's because I have a lot of combat experience, but my mana control is stable too. I opened my eyes, pouring more focus into holding the spell steady. Katia watched me, a faint look of genuine surprise crossing her face. Suddenly, a loud, thunderous explosion erupted right outside the tavern. A panicked mercenary burst in, shouting, What was that? What's going on?" I immediately dropped the spell, but before I could move, Katia tightly grabbed my wrist. "Master?" I asked, confused. "Derek, don't say anything and just follow me," she whispered, pulling me quickly towards the back exit. We rushed out into the alleyway as the local guards investigated the chaotic scene, yelling about the sudden explosion. She led me briskly down a quiet, narrow street away from the commotion. I stopped and looked at her back. Master. She glanced over her shoulder, her expression deadly serious under the setting sun. Derek, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. I gulped and nodded nervously. Yes. As you know, nobles are sensitive about their privileges, and magic is the greatest privilege among them all. An innate power is treated like a blessing, but only for nobles. Very rarely, some commoners do reach the 3-star level, but they're usually commoners who dedicated their entire lives to magic. And what you just used, she stepped closer to me, is a 2-star illusion spell called auditory hallucination. I stared at her, realizing she had literally staged the explosion outside just to cover up my sudden advancement. And so, at age 14, I officially became a 2-star mage. The system confirmed my access to 2-star magic was fully unlocked. After that close call, Katya continued taking me along on carriage rides, teaching me various spells while I cleaned my gear. A year passed like that, and eventually, Katya had to pack her bags. The Count Elster family appointed her as a private tutor, a family so powerful even the Grand Duke of the capital couldn't treat them carelessly. It was an offer she simply couldn't refuse. She smiled down at me one last time before leaving. Guys, losing 2 mentors in a row isn't exactly great for a resume. Becoming a magic teacher for a noble family of that caliber is an enormous blessing for anyone. She deserved it. Before she left, she gifted me a 2-star magic book. My system window lit up with new combat and illusion spells to master. I sat alone on my bed, gripping the heavy book. It was time to put in the work. Another year later, I walked out of my room, leaving the worn-out book behind. I had successfully taught myself 2 more 2-star spells. I walked up to Beldurn's Tears Tavern, where my boss called out from inside. "How about it, Derek? We got a proper job after a while." I sat quietly at the counter and asked, "What kind of job?" He slammed his hand on the wood, grinning widely. "It's a request from none other than the Grand Duke Duplain family. Do you know what this means?" I raised an eyebrow, highly skeptical. Duplain? That Duplain? Why would they come to us? He practically threw a handful of imaginary coins in the air. "Hey man, is that what's important right now? It's Duplain, the ones who spend gold coins like water." He grabbed me by the collar, shaking me violently. "And man, if we just open a connection with Duplain through this job, we can create more opportunities with them in the future." I gently pushed his hands off my cloak. "So what do they want us to do?" "Nothing much," he smiled confidently. "They want us to hunt down a few monsters on the outskirts of the Grand Duchy." I narrowed my eyes. "That's it?" "Of course. Would those noble lords go back on their word?" I rested my chin on my hand, sighing. Something smells fishy about this. I stood up and headed straight for the door. "I'm not doing it. Just get someone else." The boss panicked, screaming, "Hey, Derek, wait a minute." I glanced back over my shoulder, completely unfazed. "Just call someone else. You know I don't do shady jobs." He gritted his teeth and yelled, "Hey, if that's the case, I'll just do it myself." "But they need a mage. A mage. Don't you know mages are scarce in mercenary companies these days?" He pleaded, leaning over the bar. "You're the only one who can do it. That's why I'm calling you." I sighed again. "Why would they need a mage just to hunt a few monsters?" "1 Adel gold coin," he bellowed, his face red. "That's not the commission, that's the down payment." I completely froze, staring at the gleaming gold coin resting in my hand. Okay, maybe I could be a little flexible with my morals for once. Soon after, the clients arrived. An older gentleman with a monocle, a kindly-looking maid, and a mysterious girl whose face was hidden deep inside a blue hood. The boss shoved me forward enthusiastically. "Derek, say hello. These people are your clients." The monocle guy immediately frowned, dismissing me. "This won't do. A child who hasn't even had their coming-of-age ceremony?" he sneered. I had expectations when I heard he distinguished himself in the Dawn War, but to send such a child on this request, the boss waved his hands frantically, sweating bullets. No, dispatch officer. This guy is the real deal. He's the most skilled mage I know." The man just turned away in pure disgust. "Let's go. This is not a mission to entrust to such a child." The hooded girl lingered for a split second, catching my eye before turning away. I stepped forward, my voice ice cold. It was time to show these nobles exactly how a child handles business. Soon, we were standing out in the lush, bright wilderness of the Grand Duchy of Duplain. A hideous green goblin shrieked as my mana blast sent it flying backward. My red eyes locked on to the next squirming target. With a swift, brutal slash, I ended the threat. Another one leaped at me from behind. I casually sidestepped its heavy swing. I stood over the trembling creature, my clothes stained but my expression completely bored. I unleashed a massive surge of blue lightning, frying the remaining monsters in seconds. They didn't stand a chance. I turned back to the monocle guy, wiping some dirt from my cheek. "It's all done, dispatch officer." He stood there with his arms crossed, clearly surprised by the sheer efficiency. Oh, I see. The hooded girl smiled softly from the shadows. You caught all of them so quickly. Later that evening, back at Beldern's Tears Tavern, Philanu slammed her hands on the table, her face bright red with rage. You became a noble's dog, is that it? Derek! She leaped aggressively onto the bar counter, screaming. Even though we're shabby commoners, we shouldn't become nobles' dogs. The boss tried to pull her down, yelling, Philanu, get down! What are you doing? We have customers! She ignored him completely, pointing an accusing finger right at his face. Derek didn't tell you how much this job pays, did he? How much? How much are they paying for you to throw away your pride and crawl between a noble's legs? The boss sweat dropped, muttering, crawling between legs isn't actually part of the request. He held up his hand confidently. What? 1 silver coin? She yelled in his face. The boss just closed his eyes and grinned like an absolute smug villain. 1 gold coin. Her eyes practically turned into sparkling stars, drool literally forming at the corner of her mouth. Instantly changing her tune, she sat primly at the table, shouting, please let me crawl between their legs too. The boss yelled back, hey, be quiet, will you? Crawling between legs isn't part of the request. Soon, Felina was passed out drunk on the table, drooling happily. Boss asked me, so how was the job? I replied, nothing much really, just caught a few goblins, and that was it. Then he asked, the first impression was bad, but they seem pretty wealthy, don't they? I looked at him and said seriously, they do, but all 3 of them were lying. Boss asked, really? A noble family's dispatch officer has 3 things, youth, stamina, and social skills. I looked for those, but that person had none of them, I explained logically. And the woman who claimed to be a scullery maid had hands far too clean for someone doing rough work, and that apprentice inspector. I narrowed my eyes, remembering her confident, unbothered aura on the battlefield. The boss just shrugged indifferently. We're mercenaries. We don't need to dig too deep into our clients. Just do the job and get paid, that's all. I nodded slowly, keeping my suspicions to myself. Jaden is right. This is the wild, and in the wild, only survival matters. Everything else doesn't matter. The next day, we returned to the Grand Duchy of Duplain to finalize the contract. I stood confidently in front of the 3 disguised nobles, the field behind me still littered with defeated goblins. All cleared. Goblins won't appear for a while now. The boss smiled greedily at the supposed dispatch officer. So then, how about the final payment? The old man gracefully flicked 2 shiny gold coins right into the boss's hand. The boss practically cried with joy, violently ruffling my hair. Derek, look at this! 2 gold coins! 2! With this much gold! I just stared blankly, swatting his heavy hand away. Let's put that down and talk. The monocle man coughed politely, demanding our attention. Ahem. He looked at me with newfound respect. Derek, I highly value your skills, so I'd like to entrust you with a new request. Would that be all right? The boss and I both froze completely. Excuse me, the man stated calmly. For this request, the Grand Duke's estate is offering 15 idle gold coins. We both completely lost it, screaming, what? 15 coins? He adjusted his monocle, waiting for my answer. Will you do it? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Soon, we were riding comfortably in a luxurious carriage toward the heart of the estate. We pulled up to the Grand Duchy of Duplain Manor. It was absolutely massive, sprawling with perfectly manicured gardens and armed guards everywhere. The boss whistled in awe. Wow, so this is the Grand Duke Duplain's residence. Impressive. I just stood there quietly, taking it all in. The monocle man turned to us. Before we go in, let me introduce myself. The boss chuckled nervously, completely missing the tension. What? Oh no, we've known each other for more than a day or two, so please be comfortable with us. The man ignored the casual pleasantries entirely. I'm Delon, the chief steward of the Grand Duke's estate. I apologize for hiding my identity due to the nature of my work. The boss started sweating profusely, suddenly realizing he'd been completely casual with a highly ranked official. What? Oh my, what should I do? The maid stepped forward, opening her eyes and smiling warmly. I'm Katerina, the head maid of the Grand Duke's estate. I thought to myself, not a dispatch officer but the chief steward, not a scullery maid but the head maid. I expected it, but their ranks are quite high. Then, the girl in the blue cloak confidently stepped forward. The boss trembled beside me. Then that person is. She reached up and grabbed the edge of her large hood. She looked right at me with stunning blue eyes. I am Iselin Eleanor Duplain, eldest daughter of the Duplain family. I would like to appoint Derek as the magic tutor for my younger sister Diella. My eyes went wide in shock. Wait, the young lady's magic tutor? Now that is a plot twist I seriously didn't see coming. We finally arrived at the magnificent Grand Duchy of Duplain. The heavy double doors to the Grand Duke's office swung open with a loud creak. Inside, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Grand Duke and Valerian were already deep in a heated standoff with Reg. The Grand Duke sat behind his massive desk, glaring at his son. What do you think you're doing, Reg? He demanded, his voice cold and steady. Conduct yourself with dignity. But Reg was absolutely furious. Pointing down at a trembling servant, he yelled, "The one who needs to act with dignity isn't me but Dila. She's gone too far, and now she's even laying hands on the people I hired." The poor maid was just kneeling there, sobbing her eyes out. His brother Valerian calmly tried to de-escalate the situation. "Lower your voice, Reg. Father and I are in the middle of a conversation. More than 10 servants quit just last month," Reg argued back, throwing his arm out. "Not to mention she smashes objects whenever she feels like it." He slammed his hands on the desk, completely losing his temper. "How long are you going to keep turning a blind eye to that menace, Father?" Valerian quickly stepped in with a sharp warning. "That's enough. Stop it and leave." Reg just gritted his teeth in sheer frustration. "Father," Ray pressed on, refusing to back down, "even if Dila is a good-for-nothing, don't we still have Isoline?" He completely crossed the line then. "I think it's time we let Dila go." The Grand Duke slowly removed his glasses, his eyes burning with intense rage. "That isn't for you to decide, Reg." Ray kept pushing his luck, completely oblivious to the danger. "I had the Grand Steward look into a monastery. Instead of living while being treated like a burden, wouldn't it be better for Dila to devote herself to God's will?" Yeah, guys, this is where diplomacy ends, and his parenting style gets extremely physical. Before Reg could even finish his sentence, his father violently grabbed him by the back of the head. With a visceral crunch, he slammed Reg's face straight into the floor. A terrifying aura of magic erupted from the Grand Duke, filling the entire room with pressure. "I believe I told you that's not your decision to make, Reg." Blood trickled from Reg's mouth as he strained to speak through the pain. "When the time comes to decide, you must decide, Father." His father just stared down at him with an icy, unforgiving glare. Meanwhile, oblivious to the family drama inside, I was walking down the grand hallway with Asaline. She turned to me. "Have you ever heard about my younger sister, Dila?" I nodded slightly. "I've seen Lady Dila in the Duplain family's registry." She smiled bitterly, her eyes darkening. "Yes, that's right. She's probably not well known to the public." We walked straight into the awkward aftermath. Aisling stuttered in surprise. "Valerian," as Reg stormed past us, clutching his bleeding face. Valerian smiled warmly, as if nothing violently unhinged had just happened. "Oh, Isoline, it's been a while. How has your experience in Ebelstein been?" She bowed gracefully. "Thanks to your care, I've been living comfortably." Valerian gestured dismissively toward the hallway. "I see. As you can see, Reg is a bit hurt, so let's catch up later." She nodded respectfully. "I understand." I watched quietly as Valerian and the battered Reg walked away. My red eyes narrowed, instantly analyzing the deeply fractured family dynamics at play here. Even out in the hall, I could see that terrified maid still sobbing in the corner. Afterward, Isoline and I took our seats before the Grand Duke. He adjusted his posture, looking at his daughter. "I'm relieved to hear you've been doing well in Ebelstein." "It's all thanks to you, Father," Isoline replied gently. Then she gestured toward me. "Oh, this is the magic tutor I brought from Ebelstein. He said he'd take charge of Dila." The Grand Duke pushed up his glasses, giving me a highly skeptical look. I see." Sensing the mood, Isoline immediately stood up. "I assume you're busy, so we'll take our leave." As I turned to follow her out, his deep voice commanded the room. "You there, stay behind." I halted in my tracks, looking back over my shoulder. He casually flipped through the forged credentials Dellen had prepared for me. "You're quite young. 16, you said?" he asked, clearly probing for any weaknesses in my story. I kept my posture relaxed and confident. "Yes." "Can you handle magic to some extent?" he questioned. I deliberately downplayed it. "I can use a bit of one-star magic." He let out a low, amused chuckle. "Ho-ho. You have no reason to lie," he warned, his tone shifting. "Humility doesn't always come off as a sign of virtue." I stayed completely silent, maintaining direct eye contact. Suddenly, a suffocating, immense wave of magical energy filled the room. I thought to myself, Grand Duke Duplain, I guess humility won't work on a 5-star mage. I slightly bowed my head, entirely unfazed by his overwhelming pressure. "I apologize if I came off as disrespectful." He instantly withdrew his aura. "It's fine. I know why you carry yourself that way. Being too talented can end up eating away at you." He leaned back, adjusting his glasses. "Judging by your age and attire, you don't look like someone suited to be a magic tutor." I gave him the blunt, honest truth. "I'm a mercenary." He sighed softly. "Since Aisling chose you, I won't pry any further. I'll grant you entry to the annex of the residence where Dila lives. Have a maid guide you. You may go now." He dismissed me. But I didn't move an inch. "May I ask you one thing?" He paused, mildly surprised. "Go on." "I'm a mercenary, Your Grace," I explained firmly. "If I take a commission, it is my duty to see it through, so that Lady Dila may learn magic and enter high society as a proper noble. Lady Isoline commissioned me." He frowned, visibly annoyed. "Why are you spelling out the obvious?" Because I have an earnest request to make of you, your grace, I said boldly. He raised an eyebrow, curiosity finally catching his attention. Meanwhile, across the estate in the annex, a heavy porcelain plate sliced dangerously through the air. It shattered violently against the wall, causing a terrified maid to scream. The maid dropped to her knees, begging for mercy. I'm sorry. I sincerely apologize, Miss Dila. Dila just neared down at her. You sorry? Did you think that, given your status, apologizing will change anything? Her voice dripped with absolute malice. Get out of my sight right now. If you show yourself to me one more time, I'll throw that plate at your lowly face. While that deeply toxic chaos unfolded, back in Ebelstein, Iceland was having tea with my old boss, the brawny barkeep. Why Derek, of all people? He asked, confused. Magic tutors should have lined up in front of you to do this at Duplain. Besides, a commoner will have difficulty working as a noble's magic tutor. Iselin looked down sadly. I think I've tried almost every famous magic master on the entire continent. In the end, they all gave up, so I opted for those who can use magic but are under desperate circumstances. She smiled hopefully. Although Derek has the background of a mercenary, he seemed to know a bit about how nobles conduct themselves and their culture. The barkeep nodded slowly. His master was a fallen noble who used to be quite successful. Derek must have learned all sorts of things from him. I see, Iselin said softly. I figured he was refined and kind despite being a mercenary. I thought that if it were him, he might be able to gently rein Dila in and lead her. Friends, Iselin was about to get a very hard reality check. The barkeep chuckled dryly. Ho ho, Lady Iselin, you need to learn how to see through people better. She blinked in confusion. Pardon? His expression turned dead serious. Derek is a mage who grew up on the streets. He worked as a mercenary before he even came of age. Do you think someone from the streets can survive from nothing but refinement and kindness? Her blue eyes widened as the realization finally hit her. At that very moment, I was marching straight through the dimly lit halls of the estate, flanked by Dellen and Katerina. We stopped right in front of the heavy, ornate doors of Dila's room. I slowly raised my gloved hand and knocked firmly on the wood. Silence. I waited for a brief moment, my expression totally unreadable. Without waiting for an invitation, I grabbed the handle. I pushed the door open and stepped right inside. Greetings. I spotted her sitting idly at a table in the center of the room. My name is Derek, I announced calmly. Please excuse me for a moment. Dila didn't even bother to turn around to face me. Come closer, she ordered haughtily. I closed the distance, walking straight toward her. A wicked, arrogant smirk crept onto her face. The exact second I got close enough, she unleashed her little trap. A massive wave of filthy water splashed directly into my face, soaking me completely. She stood there holding a wooden bucket, laughing mockingly. Oh my, this is horrible. I thought some sewer rat had come in. She leaned in, trying to humiliate me further. Are you the mercenary the Grand Steward mentioned? Or maybe not. Looking at you again, maybe you really are a sewer rat. To assert her absolute dominance, she stepped right up onto a chair. She casually poured the remaining dirty water directly over my head. Well, I prepared this for you. Does it bring back memories of your hometown? Being drenched in gutter water suits you so much better. I didn't flinch. I just let the cold, filthy water drip off my chin, staring blankly. Standing triumphantly above me, she sighed with exaggerated disappointment. Oh my, I ran out of water, what a shame. Well, this is disappointing. That was it. My patience officially ran out. She caught my intense gaze, and her confident smirk instantly vanished. Suddenly feeling intimidated, she quickly scrambled backward against the table. Yet, she still tried to maintain her arrogant facade, pointing her bare foot at me condescendingly. Know your place, sewer rat. Someone like you teaching me? Did they not teach you common sense on the streets? Before I answered her, my mind flashed back to the bold request I made in the Grand Duke's office. He had turned away, gazing silently out the massive window. I had told him straight to his face, the fact that I'm here means Lady Dila's problem can't be easily resolved. I want to ask your grace, who loves Lady Dila more than anyone else, how much authority you're willing to grant me when it comes to teaching Lady Dila. Spoiler alert, guys. He gave me full, unrestricted permission to discipline her. Back in the present, my hand moved in a sudden, violent blur. A sharp slap echoed through the room. Dila's face snapped to the side, her eyes wide with unimaginable shock as a bright red mark blossomed on her cheek. She completely collapsed onto her hands and knees. I stood up, casually unfastening my leather glove with a chillingly calm demeanor. I loomed over her in the shadows, letting the sheer weight of my menacing presence crush whatever arrogance she had left. She just held her burning cheek, staring up at me in absolute speechless terror. My glowing red eyes pierced right through her soul as I delivered my very first lesson. Get up. I remembered a conversation I had while riding a cart with my old teacher, Katia. I asked her, "Teacher, if you had to teach a stubborn student who didn't appreciate kindness, what would you do?" She thought for a moment and said, well, I suppose I'd try to understand them, embrace them, and take them in. I scoffed. Isn't that too idealistic? What about a student you can't even do that with? The essence of teaching is to lead a student in a better direction, she explained gently. If you can't communicate through understanding and acceptance, then you'll have to find a different starting point. I was confused. I asked her what a different starting point even meant. Her expression darkened as she replied, by carving fear into them. That advice stuck with me. And guys, that brings us back to the present, right after I slapped some sense into my new, incredibly spoiled student Dila. She was on the floor, clutching her red cheek. I looked down at her and said coldly, "Treat others with consideration and respect. Don't make me say things twice. Get up." She slowly pushed herself off the ground with a soft sliding sound, but instantly lunged at me, trying to strike me back. "How dare the likes of you?" she screamed, her face flushed with arrogance. "You dare lay a hand on." Before she could finish, I slapped her again. A sharp smack echoed in the room. I wasn't playing games. "I won't make you say things twice either," I warned her, letting my mana flare just enough to make my eyes glow red. "When you deal with others, you will do so with consideration and respect." Just then, she spotted the chief steward and yelled, "Grand Steward, what are you doing?" This lowborn dared to put his hands on a young lady. Dylan rushed in, looking completely panicked. "Lady Dila, are you all right?" He grabbed my shoulder, his face red with fury. "What do you think you're doing right now? How dare you lay a hand on the young lady? If the Grand Duke finds out..." I calmly reached into my coat and pulled out a rolled parchment. "His Grace has granted me full authority over all of Miss Dila's education." I read out clearly, holding the seal up for him to see. "His Grace has permitted me to employ whatever method I choose." Dylan adjusted his monocle and read the letter. He immediately started sweating. Dila just stared, realizing she was completely out of options. "Yes, friends, I actually have written permission from her own father to discipline this brat." Later that night, the estate was quiet under the moonlight, until her older brother Valerian came storming through the halls, with Reg desperately trying to hold him back. "Valerian, please calm down," Reg shouted. Valerian burst through my door, furious. "So you're the mercenary?" I sat there quietly, holding my book. I wasn't intimidated in the slightest. He lunged forward and grabbed me by the collar. "How dare you hit Dila?" Reg grabbed his arm, struggling to pull him off. "Valerian, put that down and talk." I looked him dead in the eye and said evenly, "It's something His Grace permitted." Reg tried to reason with him. "Valerian, he's a guest Iceline brought. If you act like this, what will that do to Iceline's position?" "Father allowed it too, didn't he?" Valerian glared at me, his grip loosening. "You come with me. Reg, don't interfere. Go attend to your own matters." As Valerian walked out, Reg patted my shoulder with a smile. "I heard about what happened. Dila does need a beating before she comes to her senses. Don't worry, Valerian won't go too far." I nodded silently, watching them. As Reg left, I heard him mumble, "Geez, I don't know why he's protecting that hopeless one." Valerian led me down a dark corridor to a dusty, abandoned part of the mansion. He stopped in front of a grand door and pushed it open. "Come in," he ordered. "This is the room Diella used when she stayed in the main house," he explained softly. "It's been left like this ever since." I walked in and noticed an easel with a beautiful, partially painted canvas. "Dila used to love drawing," Valerian said, his voice full of nostalgia. "Every time she asked me to look at her drawings, her face would turn red. She was so adorable." He stared at the canvas. "But she never finished a drawing. Most of the time she'd leave a blank space and only draw the parts she liked." He turned to me, his anger totally gone. "About earlier, I'm sorry I got emotional. I apologize for that." I brushed it off. "Don't worry about it." I looked around at the scattered canvases. "But why did you bring me to this room?" "I wanted to show you," he said earnestly, "that Dila wasn't a child who deserved to be despised or beaten. But at some point, she started obsessing excessively over bloodline." I examined one of the magical theory books on a desk. "And in the end, she was driven out of the main house and locked away in the annex," I noted. "I can't even guess what turned her into that. We have to stop her from being sent to the monastery," Valerian pleaded. "If she learns even one-star magic, I'll be able to persuade Father somehow." He suddenly grabbed my shoulders, looking absolutely desperate. "I'm begging you, please save Dila." I paused, putting the pieces together. Wait, I opened one of the thick tomes. She didn't completely give up on magic, judging by all the notes in the margins of these books. I looked at Valerian. "And those books over there are all theory books from the School of Regulations, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, that's right, because nobles learn from the School of Regulations." That was it. I figured out exactly what was wrong with her magic. I stared at her unfinished artwork, finally forming a plan. I slammed the book shut with a heavy thud. I'll give it a try, I told him. I already knew exactly what my different starting point was going to be. Later that night, while the rest of the estate was dead asleep, Dyla was sleeping soundly in her warm bed. So naturally, I brought a wooden bucket filled with freezing water and completely drenched her. Good morning, princess. She jolted awake with a high-pitched scream. I stood over her in the dark, holding the empty bucket. Are you seriously falling asleep right now? I asked flatly. She was shivering, completely drenched and bewildered. She stammered, asking if I was out of my mind. I grabbed her by the arm. Come with me for a moment. There's somewhere we need to go. She struggled wildly. Let go! How dare you touch me? Are you crazy? Ow. That hurts. Let go. I'm not going with you. She shrieked as I dragged her right past the completely stunned maids. What are you doing? Stop this low-born. I dragged her all the way out of the mansion, into the dark grounds beneath the full moon. I practically pulled her into the dense, dark woods surrounding the estate. With a swift motion, I tossed her to the muddy ground. She cried out as she fell. She glared up at me, furious and shivering. What do you think doing this would even change? She yelled. I sighed, looking down at her. You don't even listen. Want to hear an interesting fact? I let a dark, sinister smile creep onto my face. Honestly, I don't have any intention of teaching you magic. I just like beating up stuck-up nobles. The color completely drained from her face. She nervously stuttered, asking what I just said. Don't you agree? I continued, stepping closer. There's no reason for someone from the bottom to like nobles. This tutor nonsense is all just an excuse. She stammered again, terrified, demanding to know what I was talking about. I leaned in until I was right in her face. An excuse to beat up arrogant, high and mighty nobles like you. I slowly unsheathed my sword, the steel glinting in the moonlight. Do you know how beautiful the screams of those oh-so-noble people are? She backed away in pure fear. Do you think you'll be safe after doing something like this? I stood tall, letting my mana surround the blade. Safe, of course. You're going to be shoved into a monastery soon anyway. Who would believe anything you say? I mocked her with the very reality of my status. And if something really big happens, I can just apologize with my life. A commoner's life is worth about that much, isn't it? I could practically read her mind. She thought I was actually going to end her. She stared at me, pure survival instinct finally kicking in. She realized that if she stayed here, she was dead. Without a second thought, she scrambled to her feet and sprinted into the dark forest. She knew she couldn't outrun me in the open grassland. She was gasping for air, branches scratching her face as she ran for her life. She had to shake me off in the thick woods. It was her only chance to circle back to the residence alive. She leaped over fallen logs, moving faster than she probably ever had in her pampered life. She probably thought that if she escaped, I'd be the one facing execution. Suddenly, she skidded to a halt, sensing a massive shift in the air behind her. I casually walked forward, holding a massive, blazing fireball high above my head, illuminating the entire forest. She turned around, her eyes widening in pure horror. Fireball, she gasped. I could see the absolute shock on her face. Fireball is 2-star magic, and she couldn't comprehend how a mere mercenary could cast it so easily. I gave her a terrifying, predatory grin. Time for a little motivation. I threw the massive spear of flames directly at her. The blazing light reflected in her terrified eyes. She threw herself to the ground with a scream just as the spell hit. The impact sent a devastating shockwave of fire and debris into the air, blowing away everything in its path. She laid in the dirt, trembling uncontrollably, gulping down air as the heat washed over her. I walked out from the smoke, my red eyes glowing in the dark, and smiled. I guess I missed. The moon hung high in the night sky as our intense chase continued. Dila's legs were giving out, her ragged breaths echoing through the dense forest. She was pushing herself to the absolute limit, desperate to escape. Suddenly, her foot caught on an unseen root. With a heavy thud, she crashed into the ground. She groaned in pain, struggling to keep moving. To keep the pressure on, I flicked my wrist, sending a volley of glowing magic arrows flying past her. Her eyes widened in sheer panic. The arrows pierced the ground around her with sharp hisses. Missing her on purpose, of course. Guys, you really think I'd skewer my only paying student? She froze, staring at the glowing mana practically inches from her face. I stepped casually out of the shadows. You are pretty quick, I taunted calmly. It is hard to believe that speed belongs to someone who has been shut inside the annex all day. She looked back at me, absolutely terrified. Instinct took over, and she scrambled back to her feet, darting into the woods once more. I just watched her go, completely unfazed. I could practically hear her thoughts, wondering how long she had to keep running, and if she could even get away. Taking a moment, I knelt down, placing my glowing hand against the cool earth to trace the flow of mana. I stood up, gazing down the dark dirt path. Staring at the trees, it suddenly clicked. I thought to myself, that forest is the exact one I saw in her paintings. Without even realizing it, she had felt the mana in the vast wilds and transferred that raw feeling directly onto the canvas. This was definitely the answer to unlocking her potential. Just as I was putting the pieces together, a wild yell broke the silence. Dila lunged from the bushes, swinging a massive rock right at my head. I swiftly drew my sword, parrying the heavy stone with a loud clash, sending her sprawling back to the ground. She stared up at me in absolute horror, realizing her sneak attack had failed. I looked down at her trembling form. "I will admit that your spirit is admirable," I praised. "Knowing it would be hard to shake pursuit, you chose to strike back instead. That could not have been an easy decision." My expression hardened. "But you do not even have the strength left to run anymore." I leveled my glowing blade directly at her. "Any last words?" She let out a breathless, exhausted laugh. Defiance flared in her eyes as she spat. "Unlike you, lowborns, I do not grovel. Just end it." I lowered my stance slightly. "Why are you so obsessed with bloodline?" That struck a nerve. She flinched, the tough facade instantly cracking. Tears streamed down her face. "Then what would I have left?" she cried out, her voice breaking. "If you take away this great bloodline from me, what do I have left?" She slammed her fists into the dirt, weeping bitterly. "Magic, magic, magic." She looked up, screaming at me. "Do you think I never tried?" I stood in silence, letting her pour out years of pent-up frustration. "No matter how hard I try, it still does not work," she sobbed. "Magic or painting, if I get weeded out of everything, if I fall behind in everything, then what do I have left besides bloodline? If even that is gone, then what am I?" I remained completely silent, letting the heavy truth hang in the air. Taking a deep breath, I channeled a surge of blue mana into my sword, raising it high. She braced herself for the impact. "I have heard enough," I stated coldly. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering a final goodbye. I swung the blade down with all my might. She squeezed her eyes tighter, waiting for a strike that never came. Slowly, she opened her eyes, utterly stunned by the glowing frost shielding her. She had done it. She was perfectly safe inside her own magical fortress. She looked at her glowing hands in disbelief and stuttered, "Is this magic?" I casually sheathed my sword. Giving a respectful bow, I smiled. "Good work, Lady Dila. Please pardon my rudeness." She just stared blankly, still processing that her life wasn't over. "It may not be something you could truly call magic, as it is just a manifestation of mana," I explained. "But you still did it." She let out a shaky gasp, the adrenaline completely leaving her body. The sheer relief and shock finally broke her, and she started bawling her eyes out right there on the grass. I just stood there awkwardly outside the ice spikes, letting her cry it all out. After a while, the tears stopped and the moon began to set. I sat her down on a fallen log and carefully bandaged her scraped leg. "That means you are from the School of the Wild," I revealed. "I have heard most nobles learn the School of Regulations. At its core, every school of magic is essentially the same, but it differs enormously in the process of understanding and mastering it. So trying to learn magic through the rigid theory of regulations was bound to cause problems. You are not just trying to wear clothes that do not fit. It is like you are forcing yourself into clothes that will not even go on your body," I finished. She looked at me, completely bewildered. "How did you know that I am from the School of the Wild? Mages born with the temperament of the wild usually sense the mana in nature when they are young," I explained. She looked at me, her eyes wide with sudden realization. I stood up, brushing off my cloak. "All right, that is enough. You should be able to walk now." As I started heading back, I tossed an offer over my shoulder. "Starting tomorrow, I will teach you how to manifest mana naturally." Suddenly, Vi heard a soft voice behind me. "Derek." I glanced back. She was blushing, looking away as she stuttered a quiet thank you. I could not help but smile. "Let's go," I called out. She eagerly rushed to catch up, shouting that she was coming with me. On the walk back, I asked her about that beautiful sunset painting in her room. She proudly admitted it was her masterpiece, though she noted I was the first person to ever realize it was actually finished. The next morning, golden sunlight flooded the estate. Back in her room, Dila woke up with a newfound determination. I was not there to see it, but apparently she immediately tried to summon her magic again. Focusing intently, she managed a tiny wisp of smoke from her fingertips. "This is hard," she mumbled to herself. Meanwhile, out in the hallway, a poor maid was carrying a heavy wooden bucket of water. Frustrated but eager to learn, Dila stormed out of her room, practically blowing the heavy doors open and scaring the living daylights out of the maid. The bucket slipped from the maid's hands, water splashing everywhere. It pulled right over Dila's pristine shoes. The maid's face drained of color. She stuttered an apology to Lady Dila, panicking and expecting the usual tyrant treatment. Dila glared down at her menacingly. The maid dropped to her knees, bowing on the floor and begging for mercy. But Dila just calmly stepped around her. "Watch where you are going," she said casually. The maid looked up in utter shock and stuttered, "What is happening? Why is she not hitting me?" The other maids gathered around, totally speechless, wondering what on earth happened to the terror of the annex last night. As for me, I was finally getting some well-deserved rest, sleeping peacefully in my cozy bed. Suddenly my door flew open with a loud bang. "Derek! Derek!" I groaned, burying my face in my hands. Rubbing my tired eyes, I grumbled, "What is it?" There stood Dila, looking way too energetic, flanked by the head steward Deland. "Teach me how to handle the mana I manifested," she demanded, completely ignoring Dellen's scolding about her manners. Dellen was shocked to know that she manifested mana. "You said you would teach me today, so hurry up and teach me," she insisted, glaring at me. I was not having any of it. "Come back in the afternoon," I muttered, shutting the door right in their faces. Outside, Dellen was literally crying tears of joy into his handkerchief, overwhelmed that she actually wanted to learn. Dila just clicked her tongue in annoyance. She immediately started aggressively pounding on my door. "Who do you think you are, telling me to come back later? Open the door right now. Teach me now." I crawled back under my warm covers, trying to block out the noise. "Hey, open the door, you crazy, arrogant fools," she yelled from the hallway. Man, kids these days really have zero respect for a good night's sleep. Meanwhile, guys, news of my success was already spreading through the estate. I could hear rhythmic footsteps echoing down the hall. The maids were gossiping. "Did you hear? Lady Dila didn't break a single plate today," one whispered excitedly. Another chimed in. "Yeah, that's right. I splashed water this morning and didn't even get punished." As Reg walked past them, he overheard their murmurs. "They're saying Lady Dila manifested magic," one maid said. "Oh my, are you serious?" He stopped in his tracks and headed straight for his father's office. The Grand Duke looked up from his desk. "Dila manifested magic?" he asked, confirming the report. "Yes, father," Reg replied. "I asked the head butler and the servants repeatedly." The Duke let out a sigh of relief. "That's a relief." But Reg wasn't convinced. "This isn't something we should jump to conclusions about just because she manifested magic, father." Valerian immediately snapped at him. "Reg, your sister manifested magic. You should be praising her." Back at the annex, Dila was sitting on her bed, hugging her knees. "Are you sulking?" I asked. She sat curled up on the floor, pouting. "I'm not sulking. I'm angry," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Even if you act spiteful like that, it won't change anything." She stubbornly repeated, "I'm not being spiteful, I'm angry." Guys, dealing with a noble teenager's mood swings is honestly harder than fighting goblins, trust me. Even if you keep pouting, there's nothing we can do, I told her firmly. "There's an order to everything." She glared at me fiercely. "I'm not pouting," I said. "I'm angry." I just stared at her in complete silence, because she immediately broke into a nervous sweat and stuttered a concession. "Fine, let's say I'm pouting." I pulled up a chair with a heavy scrape. "Rest is just as important as learning," I explained calmly. "You've rested enough, so now you need to study." Dila rolled her eyes, mocking me. Sure, of course you'd say that." I let a dark shadow fall over my face, leaning in. "Then shall I teach you in a way that's not stuffy?" I reminded her of our little midnight forest hunt. She sat up straight like a board, sweating nervously. She stammered, "Forget it." I sparked some blue mana in my hand. "Today, we'll practice magic manifestation. Once you can freely use it, you'll be able to learn one-star magic before long. The School of the Wild has no rigid system," I continued, "so it's ideal for self-study. It pursues far more freedom than the School of Regulations." I looked right at her. "To be honest, you actually suit the School of the Wild quite well." She blinked, completely confused. "What are you talking about?" "It's exactly what it sounds like. Your free-spirited nature has good compatibility with the School of the Wild. And on top of that, you were born with Duplain blood, so you're overflowing with talent." Her ear twitched at the sudden compliment. "You're saying I'm talented?" she asked. "Yes. If you can conjure up an ice wall the instant you manifest, then you're certainly overflowing with talent." She puffed up her chest. "Then what? I'm some kind of genius." "Having talent and being a genius are clearly different things," I corrected her. She argued they were the same thing, but I shut her down flatly. "No, they're different." She groaned, giving up. "Ugh, fine. Sure, you're amazing." Afterwards, she eagerly asked, "So what's next?" And I began explaining the finer details of manifestation. The very next day, she burst into my room, blue mana sparking in her hand. "Derek! I can do magic manifestation now, but I can't get the direction right." The very next day, she barged in again. "Derek, look at this. I tried imbuing it with cold, but something feels off." And the day after that, she chased me down the hall. "Derek, I can feel the magic, but the sensation is weird. I tried to hide outside by a tree to read in peace, but she found me there too. Derek, what are you doing here? I told you to stay near the annex, she yelled, hands on her hips. Do you think father lent you those spell books so you could slack off? I flipped a page casually. Yes, he lent them to me for that exact purpose. She grabbed my arm, dragging me away. So what? I succeeded at letting the magic flow out like you said, so hurry up and check it. Later that afternoon, I was summoned to the main estate. Valerian was waiting for me. Did you call for me? I asked. He turned around warmly. Oh, you're here? Take a seat. Let's talk. We sat down for tea. How's Dila been lately? He asked. She's made quite a bit of progress, I replied honestly. But learning one-star magic will likely take a bit more time. He nodded thoughtfully. I see. My mother, who went to a social gathering, will probably return sometime next week. His tone shifted, becoming serious. I'll tell you this in advance. She's not someone you can take lightly. The people in this estate are fine, but nobles by nature don't like commoners holding key positions. You know that too, don't you? He pressed. I nodded calmly. I'll keep that in mind. Is that why you called me? He stayed quiet for a moment, then stood up and began pacing, looking dramatic. I'm the next head of House Duplain, and that means it's a position where one embraces and includes the members of their house. To do that, they must be sincere with every member. But that's really difficult, he continued. Because a person's heart can be so deep and profound. It'd be nice if everyone's thoughts and values were the same, but that isn't the reality. I stared at him, completely lost. So what is it you're trying to say? He dramatically threw his fist into the air and cried out, Dila won't play with me, Derek. I stared at him in sheer disbelief, my face completely deadpan. Guys, I swear I lose brain cells every time I talk to the men in this family. He practically sparkled with delusion. I still vividly remember how she used to welcome me with a smile when we were little. Where would you find another angel like that in the world? I immediately thought of Dila screaming at me just hours ago. Angel? Yeah, right. Then, Valerian suddenly grabbed me. No, wait. Look at this first. I learned how to make dolls from the maids. He held up the most horrifying, stitched-together voodoo doll I had ever seen. What do you think? Doesn't it look exactly like Dila? Can you feel her big brother's love? I gave him a deadpan glare. Are you trying to curse someone? Valerian immediately broke down, sobbing pathetically. A few days later, I was greeted by an elegant older woman surrounded by maids. She smiled graciously. I've heard a lot about you, that we found a very capable magic teacher. She placed a hand on her chest. Nice to meet you. I'm Miriella Dybel Duplain. If it wouldn't be an inconvenience, I'd like to send you a gift for my territory. I didn't miss a beat. Keeping my expression perfectly neutral, I shut her down instantly. I'm not affiliated with any house. Her polite smile faltered, leaving her completely stunned. Pardon? Around the same time, Aseline, the one who actually hired me, was preparing to leave the estate. Before stepping into her carriage, she turned to me and sighed. I'm glad we brought you to the Grand Duke's residence, Derek. She gave me a gentle smile. As her older sister, I'd like to stay by Dila's side longer, but I have a lot to take care of in Ebelstein, so I'm leaving her to you. I gave her my usual flat response. Yes, I understand. Suddenly, my tavern boss, who was escorting her, smacked my shoulder with a heavy thud. Derek, she's trusting you with her sister. Your answer was way too lifeless, wasn't it? He leaned out of the carriage, warning me to wrap things up quickly, before Felina made a huge fuss back at the tavern. Iseline just smiled, saying she was counting on me. And with that, the carriage rolled away. But apparently, the moment they hit the road, Iseline gasped in horror. Oh my, I completely forgot. When the barkeep asked her what she meant, she looked completely panicked. My mother will be returning next week, and I forgot to give him a heads up. He asked if that was really something I needed a warning about. And honestly, she absolutely should have warned me, because little did I know, the Grand Duchess was storming through the halls right at that moment, acting like a literal god of anger. As I later found out, she barged right into the Grand Duke's office, slamming her hands down on his desk. A commoner is Dila's teacher? What is all that about? The Duke, barely looking up from his paperwork, sighed. I can hear just fine, so how about you lower your voice? She wasn't having it. That's not the problem right now, dear. It's Dila, you know, our beloved youngest daughter. He took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Miriella, as you know, I don't exactly like appointing commoners to positions, but every teacher with a good bloodline gave up on her, didn't they? Even so, how could you take in some man who used to roll around in the mercenary world? Segua demanded. The Duke stayed perfectly calm. Finding a decent magic teacher isn't easy, and Derek was recommended by Iseline. She threw her hands up in utter frustration. But there has to be a certain standard. She even tried to replace me right then and there, suggesting her younger brother Flam could teach Dila now that her magic had manifested. Just as the argument hit its peak, the grand double doors swung open and Valerian stepped in. Mother, please calm down for a moment. You didn't come here to fight with father, did you? She shot him a fierce glare. Step aside, Valerian. This isn't something we can just let slide. Right on cue, Reg strolled into the room. In the end, the question is whether that commoner mage has the qualities to be Dila's teacher. Mother, isn't that right? Valerian stared at him, instantly sensing trouble. Reg continued smoothly. A commoner becoming a noble's magic teacher isn't a normal situation. Of course, if he truly has the necessary qualities, then I don't think it'll be a major problem. He turned to the Duke. Father, I'll test the qualities of this man called Derek. If I defeat him in a magic spar, enough. The Duke cut him off instantly. He's the real deal as a mage. Reg fell completely silent, his eyes narrowing, before turning back with a cold smirk. Then what about testing Dila? Valerian looked completely caught off guard. The Duke didn't answer, letting a heavy silence fill the room. Taking that as permission, Reg turned and walked away. Valerian immediately chased after him, calling his name. He grabbed Reg's shoulder. What on earth are you thinking? A magic spar. Reg shrugged him off easily. Valerian, do you truly believe Diela has turned over a new leaf? Have you forgotten what she's done? Even so, she's your only sister, Valerian pleaded. She's blood. We need to hold her close and protect her. Reg scoffed. Ha! Blood? His face twisted with pure disgust. That blood is what's been trying to bring our house down, as if everything she's done so far wasn't bad enough. If she debuts in high society like this, it really will be the end of us. Valerian stared at him in disbelief. Is that truly how you feel, Reg? Reg didn't even look back. Dila was the first one to cross the line. The best thing for her is to be kept shut away in the annex. His mind was made up. He wanted to break her completely. Meanwhile, totally oblivious to the massive family drama, I was enjoying a peaceful morning in my room until Dila violently kicked my door open. Derek, I sighed, barely looking up from my book. What is it so early in the morning? She marched right over and slammed an official notice onto my pages. She was trembling with anger and fear. If I lose this magic spar, you're fired. I picked up the paper, casually skimming it. Yes, I heard. Young Master Reg is already a seasoned one-star mage, so it'll probably be difficult for you to win. She exploded. Is that all you have to say? You're going to get fired. I calmly rolled up the parchment. I'm a mercenary. I do the job I'm hired to do, and I take the pay that comes with it. That's all. I met her gaze, pretending not to care. I've already been paid more than enough. The color completely drained from her face. Do you really mean that? And just like that, the week vanished. The day of the spar arrived. The estate's training grounds were fully prepared and packed with servants. The Grand Duke and Miriella walked down to the arena, looking as serious as ever. The Duke spotted me waiting quietly by the benches. You've come. I gave him a respectful, formal bow. I could tell he was studying me closely. He was probably thinking, he doesn't look nervous at all. Is he confident? He took his seat on the throne, seemingly satisfied that I had the nerve to show up. Then, with a heavy thud of boots on the stone, Reg stepped into the arena, his dark cape trailing behind him. He glared across the grounds. This won't be a simple magic spar. Today I'm going to break Dila completely. He muttered to himself. Dila, I'll make you regret the past down to your bones. And then, Small Boots stepped onto the arena floor. Dila stood there under a dark red hood. Looking at her, I couldn't help but remember the rest of our conversation from that morning. When she asked if I really meant I was leaving, I had turned away and told her, as you've probably noticed, your magic growth has already gotten on track. You can't use one-star magic right away, but it won't take that long. Tears had welled up in her eyes. That's because you were born with too plain blood. Why are you suddenly saying that? I sighed. Didn't I tell you before? The School of the Wild focuses on self-study rather than passing things down. She broke down, crying out. So, why are you saying that kind of thing right now? I had stayed completely silent, letting her vent. She looked down, her voice trembling. Derek, I know I'm not that great of a student, but still, I want to keep learning magic from you. I don't want anyone else as my teacher. Seeing her like that, guys, I'm a mercenary, not a heartless monster. I adjusted my gloves with a soft sliding sound and said, I'll tell you in advance. I don't know the etiquette or rules for nobles' magic spars. I've never done one. I looked her dead in the eye. But I can teach you how to win in a fight. Do you want to win? Now, as she stood in the arena, the insulting whispers of the nobles echoed in the dark. Looks like Lady Dila doesn't have any magic after all. Even that famous teacher gave up on her, didn't he? The arrogance kept coming. Duplain's past its prime. All that little thing knows how to do is cause trouble. Thank goodness at least there's Lady Iselim. His child is the one that'll bring him down. Better not to have one and to give birth to something like that. But Diela's words from that morning rang clear in my ears. With tears running down her face, she had looked at me and said, Yeah, make me win. And now, she didn't step up to the arena as Reg's younger sister. I watched her from the sidelines, feeling a rare surge of pride. She stood there, her eyes glowing with pure, unyielding determination, stepping into the light not as a noble of House Duplain, but strictly as my student, and as a true mage. Dila and her arrogant brother Reg finally stood facing each other on the massive stone platform. The chief steward, Dellen, cleared his throat to command the arena's attention. He loudly announced the rules, stating they would be applying the sparring rules of the high-rank mages of the Ebelstein Kelprim Salon. Reg glared down at her and coldly declared, "Then, let us begin." Dellen explained that whichever side triggered General Pelham's protective magic circle first would be declared the loser. It's a fancy little accessory that activates right before the wearer takes major damage, nullifying the opponent's spell. Watching from the sidelines, I thought to myself, so this is how nobles fight. Throwing expensive accessories around just to spar must be nice to be so rich. The time limit was 10 minutes, but it looked like Reg planned to end it way before that. Instantly, Reg began chanting, dark green magical energy violently swirling around him. A sharp breeze whipped past Yahello's cloak as Reg gathered a dense sphere of wind magic in his palm. "Sorry, but I need you to return to the annex," he said dismissively. With a sweeping motion, he unleashed a fierce crescent of wind, shouting her name. The massive blade of wind tore across the platform, heading right for her, but Dila didn't even flinch. Her blue eyes remained completely calm and focused. She swiftly dodged to the side, letting the wind blade slice harmlessly through the empty air. Reg gritted his teeth, his eyes widening in annoyance. "How dare she!" He threw himself forward, launching another rapid barrage of wind attacks, forcing Dila to slide gracefully across the floor to evade each strike. She kept her focus razor sharp, never taking her eyes off him. I analyzed her movements. She handles one-star magic with ease, but it was obvious she was still a total beginner in actual combat. By forcing her trajectory just to make her shots hit, she was going to burn through a lot of mana. Suddenly, a massive shard of ice materialized with a sharp crack, intercepting Reg's next strike. Dila slammed her hands forward, manifesting a jagged wall of pure ice to shield herself. Reg scoffed at her defense. She's not even using star-ranked magic. It's merely the manifestation of magic power, he thought, insulting her effort. Does she really think she can block my magic with such a trick? Refusing to be held back, Reg summoned multiple wind orbs. "Since it's nothing but a trick, I'll break through with sheer firepower," he yelled. He launched them relentlessly against her icy barricade. Guys, seeing her hold her ground reminded me of a conversation we had earlier. I had told her, "Remember this, Lady Dila. Mercenaries fight differently from nobles. They don't treat fair and square as a virtue. Their only focus is victory." I had warned her that it was far from a typical noble duel, and even if she won, she'd probably get heavily criticized for it. Regardless, you can still create an ending where you win. I had asked her directly. "Are you really fine with that?" And without a single shred of hesitation, she had fiercely shouted, "Of course." Back into present, a dark shadow fell over her determined face. She dashed out from behind her crumbling ice shield, narrowly evading another lethal crescent of wind. Among mercenaries, there are people who always win even when there's a massive gap in strength. Dila lunged forward, locking her eyes onto her brother. Reg whipped his arm, sending another concentrated blast of wind toward her. But Dila smoothly slid across the stone tiles, lowering her stance to duck right under it. Those people usually don't duel, they fight. She planted her hand firmly on the ground, stabilizing herself. And by fight, I mean they control the battlefield by making use of their terrain and surroundings. As another massive blade of wind hurled toward her, she didn't panic. They literally use any and all available methods to seize victory. With a thunderous crash, a massive pillar of ice erupted from the ground, completely shattering Reg's attack. They must even take advantage of the very short period their opponent lets their guard down. Dila peered fiercely through the scattering ice crystals, panting heavily but refusing to back down. Reg smirked, arrogant enough to think he had her cornered. "It's over," he muttered. Dila gasped, her eyes widening as she realized an attack was coming from her blind spot. A colossal arc of wind magic slashed violently across her position, sending a massive explosion of dust and debris erupting across the platform. I just sat there and watched, completely unfazed. Up in the balcony, the Grand Duchess screamed in absolute terror. "Dila!" She panicked, waving her arms frantically. "Dellen, what are you doing? Stop the spar, now! Dila is hurt!" But the Grand Duke remained totally calm. "Sit down," he commanded. "It's not over yet." Muriella looked at him in disbelief, stuttering, "What? You saw it yourself." Dila was clearly hit by his attack, but the Grand Duke smoothly pointed out, "Wrong. General Pelham's magic circle didn't activate." He narrowed his eyes, keenly observing the dust cloud. "I mean, the guy is a 5-star mage. Obviously, he'd notice a detail like that. Good on him for actually paying attention, guys." Meanwhile, I remained completely still on my bench. I guess they noticed I hadn't even blinked. They probably wondered if I'd already expected her to grow this much. Obviously. Down in the arena, Reg stepped forward as the smoke began to clear. He looked utterly confused. She definitely should have been struck by that, he thought. So why didn't the magic circle activate? Where did she go? Suddenly, Reg looked down, noticing a massive jagged hole in the stone floor. With a sharp crack, the floorboards beneath him splintered, and a gigantic spike of ice erupted violently from underneath, launching Reg straight into the air. He landed hard on his feet, skidding backward across the tiles. An attack from below the platform? He panicked, sweat dripping down his face. He frantically glanced at Dylan, hoping for a foul. But by the Kelbrim Salon's rules, leaving the platform should count as a loss. Dylan just shook his head, completely invalidating Reg's excuse. Nice try, buddy, but there's no crying to the referee today. Reg's eyes widened as another sharp crack echoed right beneath him. Boom! Another massive ice pillar shot up, narrowly missing him. As ice spikes began piercing through the platform in rapid succession, turning the entire arena into a deadly, hazardous minefield. Reg gritted his teeth, visibly stressed. I can't see her. Landing an attack on her will be difficult. He leaped backward, desperately dodging the icy spears. On the other hand, all she needs to do is land one blow on me. This is a spar with no trace of noble etiquette at all. He stared down into the gaping hole in the floor, shouting her name in pure frustration. Deep within the shadows beneath the shattered floorboards, Dila glared up at him. Her eyes glowed with a predatory, intense focus. She was totally in the zone. Reg froze, recognizing that look immediately. He realized that her unusually calm look was the exact same look I had when I grabbed his brother by the collar. He let out a sharp ref, a heavy mix of anger and disbelief washing over him. Back on the sidelines, I just crossed my arms and smirked. Reg finally figured it out. Dila couldn't have come up with this alone, he thought. Derek, you scum. Was this your plan? He violently threw off his cloak, standing tall among the towering ice pillars. Fine, I'll play along, he declared, holding his hand out toward the shadows, ready to face the scheme of hers. Up in the stands, the Grand Duchess was losing her mind. She shrieked, "Did Dila just go under the platform? Into that dusty pit?" She frantically begged her husband to stop the fight immediately. But the Grand Duke, calmly analyzing the situation, just stated that she hadn't broken any rules, and they should keep watching a bit more. Meanwhile, down below the shattered floor, Dila was hiding perfectly behind the jagged ice pillars she had created. Her eyes were dead serious, completely focused on her brother's movements above. She thought to herself, I can see it. The invisible flow of mana shifting directly above me. Right on cue, she launched a massive ice spike through the floor, sending Reg stumbling back with a heavy grunt. Reg was getting furious. He shouted that every single time he tried to chant, she disrupted the ground beneath his feet. His frustration was boiling over. He gritted his teeth, refusing to be humiliated like this. With a swift leap, he retreated, balancing perfectly on top of a tall stone pillar to escape her ground traps. Below, Dila instantly noticed the sudden halt in his magical energy. She narrowed her eyes, predicting that whatever he was planning, if he tried to chant again, she would strike immediately. Seeing Reg's reckless position, Chief Steward Dellen started sweating bullets, stuttering out, no, young master. But Reg ignored everyone, launching himself even higher toward the arena's giant flagpole. He calculated that at this vertical distance, she wouldn't be able to react to his attacks in time, since chanting normally was completely out of the question. He decided to just obliterate the entire platform with raw, unspoken power. With a massive surge of wind and lightning, he smashed his magic straight down into the pillar. I watched silently from the sidelines. Honestly, guys, watching a refined noble throw a tantrum and blow up his own arena is top-tier entertainment. The massive structure cracked under the immense pressure, sending debris flying everywhere with a thunderous explosion. As the column completely collapsed, Reg smoothly jumped down alongside the falling rubble. He landed with a heavy thud, kicking up a massive cloud of dust that instantly swallowed the battlefield. The Grand Duchess gasped his name in pure panic, terrified for her son. But Reg was perfectly fine, touching down gracefully in the center of the smokescreen. He wiped his mouth, his sharp green eyes scanning the thick dust, until he suddenly spotted a small silhouette sprinting right at him. Instantly, he summoned a glowing wind arrow ready to end this charade. He fired it with a sharp hiss, but Diela's reflexes kicked into overdrive. She violently twisted her body, letting the dangerous projectile graze right past her face. Reg didn't hesitate, immediately conjuring more magic, while Diela pushed forward with insane, terrifying determination. Another arrow ripped through the air, missing her by mere inches as she desperately closed the gap. She charged straight into his personal space, completely catching him off guard. Reg smirked, thinking that if she closed the distance, he still had the upper hand with close-range spells. But instead of using magic, Dila fully embraced my mercenary training. She launched herself into the air and planted a heavy, physical dropkick right into his chest. She grit her teeth, putting absolutely all her weight into the wild blow. Reg's eyes went wide with pure shock. A noble using a street brawl kick? Unheard of! He staggered back, coughing hard from the unexpected blunt force. But she wasn't done yet. While he was distracted, her hand dug straight into the dirt. With a fierce, sweeping swing, she threw a handful of coarse sand directly into his face. Reg stumbled blindly, cursing loudly as he desperately rubbed his burning eyes. Through his blurry vision, he tried to rationalize it. He wondered if she was resorting to these cheap, dirty tricks because her mana was completely depleted. The dust began to settle, revealing the two siblings staring each other down on the ruined platform. Dyla looked exhausted. She wiped the sweat and dirt from her heavily bruised forehead. A small trickle of red ran down her neck, but her posture remained incredibly defiant. Suddenly, a memory of our secret training sessions flashed through her mind. I had told her to think of magic like painting with a brush where mana was the paint and the spell was the tool. In that memory, I stood under the starry night sky and showed her the absolute essence of my power, telling her, that is, magic. She'd watched in pure awe, absorbing every word. I had carved the true, unrefined definition of magic right into her wild spirit. Back in the present, Dila closed her eyes, centering her chaotic breathing. A brilliant blue aura erupted around her as she recalled my lesson. She let the swirling energy flow directly to her fingertips, declaring internally that she would paint her masterpiece right here, right now. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with intense, terrifyingly refined power, and there it was. With a massive burst of freezing energy, she fully materialized a towering, one-star ice spear. Up in the stands, Dellin dropped his jaw, stammering in complete disbelief. The Grand Duchess stuttered, tears welling in her eyes as she realized her supposed good-for-nothing daughter was actually casting genuine one-star magic. Reg saw the immense freezing power she was holding and muttered that she was finally going to cause a massive accident. Dyla gripped the icy weapon, completely locked onto her target. Refusing to back down, Reg gathered a violent storm of wind mana around his arm. He shouted that even with her new spell, the outcome wouldn't change, summoning a deadly barrage of wind arrows. With a powerful thrust, Dila sent her ice spear rocketing forward. Simultaneously, Reg unleashed his deadly volley of wind magic. The two opposing forces hurtled towards each other and violently collided in the dead center of the arena, creating a blinding, thunderous explosion. Miriella screamed Diela's name in pure terror as the shockwave shook the stands. But as the devastating impact washed over the platform, a brilliant golden shield suddenly manifested in the smoke, absorbing the lethal blow. Reg stood there panting heavily, realizing exactly what that golden light meant. Dyla stood exhausted inside a massive blue magic barrier, her face covered in dirt from the fight. She quietly noted that the trigger had activated. Across the broken arena, Reg was on his knees, completely drained. I watched the aftermath silently. The conclusion was undeniable. She had lost. The realization hit her hard, and she immediately burst into loud, frustrated tears. Up on the balcony, the Grand Duke observed the settling dust. While Miriella was absolutely losing her mind, she screamed at her husband, demanding to know how such a dirty brawl could be called a magic duel. She yelled that it made no sense, and blamed me for teaching their young lady such nonsense. But the Grand Duke saw something entirely different. He recalled the fierce, battle-hardened spirit of their ancestors. He saw a true warrior's ambition in Dila's eyes, and silently thanked me for it. Down below, Dila wiped her tears. The Grand Duke smiled down with approval. He noted to himself how much her gaze had improved. Meanwhile, the maids frantically rushed into the arena to check on her. They panicked, urging her to receive treatment immediately, but she simply swatted their hands away. She marched right past a very awkward-looking Reg. He hesitated, struggling to find the right words. Eventually, he managed a clumsy pat on her head, stuttering out a brief compliment on her hard work. She didn't even acknowledge him, walking away with a totally empty expression as the maids followed. Instead of heading inside, she came straight over to me. I looked up at her from the bench. She stood there quietly for a second before her face crumbled. Gripping my cloak tightly, she confessed that she had lost. Tears streamed down her face as she choked out an apology. I kept my expression serious, but honestly, she had done incredibly well. I gently placed my hands on her shoulders. I assured her that it was all right and that I was fine as well. I told her to overcome this frustration and use it to grow stronger. Her eyes widened in shock. That small bit of comfort was all it took for her to completely break down, bawling her eyes out right in front of me. The maids watched from a distance, totally unsure of how to handle the situation. Suddenly, frantic footsteps approached. Miriella rushed onto the grounds, calling out her daughter's name. She wrapped Dila in a tight hug, crying about how hard her child had worked. She promised that everything was all right now and urged her to go get treated. Dila quietly agreed. As Dila was led away by the maids, Miriella stayed behind, wiping her own tears. She stood in silence for a moment, Figuring my job here was done, I turned around to leave, but suddenly Mariella stepped toward me aggressively. I glanced back, genuinely confused. She exploded, calling me a vulgar wretch and demanding to know what I had done to her daughter. Before I could even process her screaming about how a one-star spell wasn't impressive, she slapped me hard across the face. The impact stung, but I didn't flinch as she ranted about noble values and dignity that I could never understand. The Grand Duke quickly walked up, and she turned to him screaming that I was the one who taught Dila such a disgraceful fighting style. She raised her hand to strike me a second time, but her eyes widened in shock when the Grand Duke firmly grabbed her wrist, coldly asking if she knew who was actually behaving disgracefully. Mariella stuttered in disbelief, trying to justify her actions by calling me merely a commoner. He agreed, but sternly reminded her that I was their daughter's teacher. I just stood there quietly as he asked what parent in the world treats their child's teacher this way. Then he turned to me and actually asked me to forgive her, saying everyone loves their child in their own way. I kept my cool. Honestly, guys, getting slapped by an angry noble wasn't even in my top 10 worst experiences this week. I casually replied that it was fine, and he invited me to the reception room for a private discussion. We walked away, leaving Mariella holding her face in complete humiliation. Once inside his office, he got straight to business, praising me for raising Dila splendidly. As the master of the estate, he wanted to grant me a fitting reward, the highest realm permitted to a commoner. He asked if I desired a 3-star spell. I was genuinely stunned. He had struck precisely at the mark, to see right through me and offer exactly what I needed. Oh, that's the terrifying insight of a 5-star magician and the Grand Duke of a nation. I guess almost getting fired and slapped was totally worth the upgrade. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yes, I want it." With a heavy creak, the massive doors to his private collection opened. I stepped inside the grand library, my footsteps echoing softly against the towering shelves. I pulled a thick, ancient tome from the shelf with a satisfying thud as I flipped through the parchment with a soft sliding sound, absorbing the complex magical formulas. I was completely mesmerized. Amazing, I whispered to myself. Many people spend their entire lives trying to obtain even a single 2-star spellbook, and yet I was holding a library full of 3-star spellbooks. My path to greater power was wide open. I briefly thought about my tavern colleagues. Helen would absolutely cause an uproar if she found out about this payout. Meanwhile, outside in the bright morning air, Dila was striking a proud pose in a pristine new dress, beaming. I'm a 1-star mage now. I didn't even look up from my book. Well, since you did cast a 1-star spell once, you can be called a 1-star mage. She immediately flared up. What? That's it? Your student achieved something and you're not happy? Because it wasn't an early achievement. She let out a long sigh, brushing her hair back. Haha, seriously, you're not easy. I glanced at the bandages still on her face. You definitely cried a lot back then. Her face flushed bright red. Ha! Hey! Who cried? It was just dust. A little dust got in my eyes. She pouted and looked away. And father should have told me earlier. I thought you were getting kicked out. I closed my book with a light thud. Alright then, shall we start the lesson? Since you grow quickly, you'll learn other 1-star spells soon. I added casually. Your growth. It hasn't been long since your mana awakened, so casting a 1-star spell is rare, right? I told you, I'm the type who gets things done. She instantly lit up, pointing to the sky. Then what should we do first? Mana arrow? It looked convenient without chanting. Or the Windblade brother Reg used. That looked really strong. She was already imagining her next duel. No, the ice spear felt really nice. If I improve a bit more, I could probably hit Brother Rig too. I cut her off immediately. We will practice mana manifestation. Her jaw dropped. Huh, why? Wait, weren't we learning 1-star spells? There are many reasons, I explained. But in the end, the fundamentals are the most important. I started to lecture. To explain it simply, ultimately mana, but she slumped her shoulders in defeat. Fine, let's do it. She puffed her cheeks out. If you say so, then that's that. I got excited for nothing, thinking I'd learn 1-star. She noticed me staring at her quietly. She blinked, looking confused. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face? No, I said, resting my chin on my hand. I'm just surprised you listened so obediently. She turned her head indignantly. What? What kind of person do you think I am? I respected what you said from the beginning. I raised an eyebrow, recalling my very first day on the job. From the beginning, you poured dirty water on my head twice. She nervously looked away. You still remember that? I deadpanned, hard to forget, trying to escape the awkwardness. She let out a forced laugh and quickly marched away. Ha, nice weather, ha. Nice weather, ha. Mana manifestation sounds fun. I want to practice already. I couldn't help but smile. She was actually becoming a decent student. Later that night, under the bright moonlight, Dila was huffing and panting on the grass, pushing her mana to the absolute limit. I walked over, hands in my pockets. Sounds like you'll get busy soon. I kneeled down beside her as she caught her breath. She wiped the sweat from her forehead, looking completely drained. Whatever. Starting next week, I'll have etiquette classes too. Isn't that a good thing? I asked. You've learned a 1-star spell, now you receive true noble education. She glared at me tiredly. You think that's good? She started listing off her incoming torture. Basic, noble etiquette, foreign languages, geography, history, botany, piano, sewing. I don't know why I have to learn all that. Dila hugged her knees, looking small. I just want to study magic. I nodded. Then do so. The Grand Duke hired me, so we have plenty of leeway. I wonder if there really is that much time. Who would fire me now? I asked reasonably. She smiled bitterly. Why wouldn't there be? Father acknowledged you, but mother won't leave it alone. I turned to her. Why does madam want to drive me out? She sighed. Well, learning from you distances me from noble dignity, and she fears I'll become like a mercenary. Even the duel was far from the dignity nobles pursue, she added. I realized what needed to be done. Then that's simple. I looked her right in the eye. Lady Dila, silencing madam isn't actually that difficult. Remove her justification. She blinked, clearly confused. Huh. The next morning, the sun rose brightly over the grand estate. Grand Duchess Muriella was furiously pacing the halls, surrounded by anxious maids. In her mind, she was probably still picturing me teaching Dila how to tie up hostages like a street thug, or imagining Dila acting like a feral brute, carrying wild boars around high society. She muttered to her maids, yes, what could that lowborn possibly teach Dila? Even if my husband approves, I am the lady of this house. She rubbed her temples, stressed out. I must find a way. Just then, a soft voice called out, Mother? Muriella turned, surprised. Dila. Muriella's face softened into a happy, relieved smile. Oh, Dila, she started tearing up, ready to comfort her supposedly traumatized daughter. Even if people call you immature, this mother likes when you smile in my arms. She waited for Dila to run into her embrace. But then, she noticed something wasn't quite right. Dila, dressed flawlessly in a pristine blue gown, gave a perfect, graceful curtsy. Did you rest well last night, Mother? Muriella's brain completely short-circuited. Dila smiled with sickeningly sweet politeness. I couldn't leave my room due to treating my injuries, so I regret missing the chance to talk. I have many conversations I wish to share with you, but unfortunately, I had piano lessons this morning. Muriella began to sweat, completely thrown off balance by the sudden display of perfect etiquette. Dila bowed her head gently. Then I'll go first, since I'm busy with my classes, Mother. Muriella stammered, trying to regain control. Didel, etiquette classes haven't started yet, right? They begin next week, projecting the elegant aura of her older sister Iseline. Dila replied smoothly, Yes, Mother. Thanks to your concern, I'm very much looking forward to them. Defeated and bewildered, Muriella nervously answered, Oh, yes, hurry along, you'll be late. Honestly, guys, teaching her to act like a perfect noble just to spite her mother is probably my proudest strategic move yet. As Dila walked gracefully across the courtyard, a passing maid dropped her stack of firewood with a loud clatter in sheer shock. Dila stopped and asked politely, Oh my, are you hurt? Please don't overexert yourself. The poor maid, expecting to be severely punished based on Dila's past behavior, started sweating in absolute terror. Ah yes, Lady Dila. Back at the estate, Dila was happily chatting with her mother, mentioning that I was also teaching her a little etiquette. The Grand Duchess forced a stiff smile, praising Dila for studying so admirably by herself. But Dila, completely oblivious to her mother's rising blood pressure, happily corrected her, saying it was mostly thanks to my teaching. She giggled, claiming she could only achieve this much thanks to me. The Grand Duchess practically popped a vein. Honestly, guys, I'm pretty sure my name was becoming a sleeper agent trigger word for her. She stormed down the hallway, fuming over how many times the name Derek kept coming up, gritting her teeth. She wondered what on earth I did to Dila, vowing to find some way around this. Later that night, I was out alone in the woods, pushing myself to the absolute limit, studying the 3-star spellbook. Sweat poured down my face as I focused. I channeled my mana, carefully trying to stabilize the intricate magical pathways. Eventually, my concentration broke, and I collapsed onto the grass, panting heavily from complete exhaustion. Hearing the rustle of grass behind me, I turned around and saw Reg awkwardly approaching, apologizing if he was interrupting my training. I caught my breath, told him not at all, and asked what brought him out here. He sat down next to me on a fallen log, looking up at the sky, and said he wanted to talk a bit about Dila. But before getting into it, he glanced at the heavy tome in my hands, recognizing it as a 3-star spellbook. He looked genuinely shocked, asking if his grace really lent that to me. I nodded, admitting it was a difficult level for me right now, but there was no harm in studying ahead of time. Reg recalled his father's words, remembering how the Grand Duke called me a true mage. He looked at me with newfound respect, muttering how impressive it was. I brought the conversation back on track, asking him what he actually came to talk to me about regarding Dila. He suddenly looked completely flustered, awkwardly rubbing his neck as he asked what teenage girls like these days. I just stared at him blankly. Seriously? He came to the battle-hardened mercenary for teenage girl advice? Blushing furiously, he asked if she would like it if he embroidered a doll that looked like her. I told him straight up that it probably wasn't a very desirable idea, and he quickly agreed, laughing it off nervously, realizing how awkward this was getting. He stood up, scratched his head, and suggested we head back inside. 2 months passed in a flash. In Diela's room, a maid gently pinned some beautiful pink fregesia flowers into her hair. Diela smiled softly, taking in their scent, feeling like spring had already been around for the past few months. She reflected on how comfortable she was using one-star magic now, and how much closer she had gotten with the servants. She realized how much joy she had missed out on all this time, attributing every bit of her happiness to me. The maid noticed her radiant smile, teasingly asking if it was magic lesson day. Diela beamed, asking for one of the leftover flowers so she could bring it to me. But unfortunately for her, that joyful spring was about to come to a sudden, freezing halt. She arrived at my door, completely frozen in shock, the beautiful flower dropping from her hand. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes as she stammered, "What do you mean by that? Derek!" I stood there with Valerian beside me, looking down at her with a calm, indifferent expression. I told her plainly, "You heard me. There is nothing left for me to teach you. Just as there is no eternal winter, there is no eternal spring. My job here was done." The Grand Duke sat heavily behind his desk, leaning forward. "His Grace has likely noticed as well," he said, his tone dead serious. "But Lady Diela belongs to the school of the wild, and among them her trait is especially strong." I knew he was right. I thought to myself, if I involve myself with her any further, I'll only end up breaking her wings. He nodded slowly. "I understand. So there's no longer any reason for you to remain in this mansion." I agreed without hesitation. "Yes, that's correct." He stood up and looked at me with unexpected sincerity. "Thanks to you, many things have changed. Because of you, my daughter was able to grow." He turned toward the window, a rare vulnerability in his voice. "I was so consumed with managing the territory that I haven't been a good father, but I am now relieved." "When will you leave?" he finally asked. "I heard that Lady Aisling will visit the mansion soon, and then return to Ebelstein," I replied. "I plan to ride in her carriage at that time." "I see, you'll return the library key now," he instructed. I nodded. "Yes, I'll return the spell books I'm currently reading, and I'll pass the key along through the head butler." "There's no need to do that. Return the key now," he demanded. Guys, typical noble paranoia. He was probably terrified I'd swipe a few more high-level secrets on my way out the door. I handed the key over without making a fuss. He turned his back to me completely. "If there's nothing else, you may go." I gave a respectful bow, accepting that my time in this golden cage was officially over. As I walked down the grand, echoing hallway, the heavy silence of the mansion weighed on me. Suddenly Diela stepped out, blocking my path. "You show up out of nowhere, and now you're leaving again out of nowhere," she complained, trying to sound tough. "Lady Diela," I began, keeping my tone entirely professional. "It can't be helped. I know you won't listen, but I'll say it anyway." She looked up at me, all her walls dropping in an instant. "Can't you stay?" I took a firm step forward, not letting my resolve waver. "As I always have, I'll be returning to life as a mercenary," I told her calmly. "I'll study a lot of magic too, and once you build up more skill, you'll go to Ebelstein for your debutante. We can meet again then." I offered her a small, genuine smile. "If my level rises a little more by that time, I'll be able to teach you something new." She immediately started pouting, looking away. "You're annoying. You always say the right thing, so I've got nothing to say back," she muttered. Later that night, total darkness enveloped the towering estate. Meanwhile, in her room, Diela was tossing and turning, gasping for air in her sleep. She was trapped in a horrible nightmare, surrounded by shadowy figures hissing toxic words. "Diela, you're a useless child, an utterly incompetent child," they sneered. "What do you have to boast about besides your bloodline? You don't have even a speck of talent." The voices grew louder, crushing her spirit entirely. "You're the shame of Duplain. Someone like you should never have been born." She jolted awake, screaming. "No." Grabbing her head, she tried to steady her racing heart. It was a nightmare. Just then, the door burst open. A maid rushed in, looking absolutely panicked. "Lady Diela, are you all right?" I heard shouting. "What happened?" the maid asked. Diela stared at her, a very dark, familiar thought crossing her mind. "What if I create a pretext?" she thought, looking at the trembling servant. "Maybe I'll go back to slapping her in the face like before and throwing tantrums and causing trouble. Then Derek would stay here for me, wouldn't he?" The maid stepped closer, completely oblivious to the danger. "Lady Diela, are you all right? Are you feeling unwell anywhere?" Diela snapped out of it, her expression softening. "No." She finally made her choice. "I'm not going to do something like that anymore." Giving the bewildered maid a gentle, reassuring smile, she said, "I'm fine, don't worry. That won't make me valuable." The next morning arrived with a perfectly clear sky. I stood outside the manor with my luggage. Lady Aisling was already waiting in her grand carriage. "If I drop you off by the commercial district, that should be fine, right?" she asked. Yes, I'd appreciate that, I replied. She smiled warmly. Go and say your goodbyes. We'll be departing soon. I turned around and saw them all waiting for me, Valerian, Reg, and Dila. So you really are leaving? Valerian asked. I have to go back to where I came from, I answered simply. Valerian nodded with deep respect. Life in the mansion couldn't have been easy. You've worked hard all this time. If anything happens, make sure you contact me. I'll help as much as I can. I offered him a polite bow. Thank you. Then, I glanced over at Dila. She was standing there with her arms crossed, stubbornly refusing to look at me. She finally snapped, acting incredibly defensive. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Did you think I was going to beg you not to go? She huffed. Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not a child anymore. I couldn't help but smile at her bravado. It was an honor to be able to teach you. I can't proudly declare myself your teacher, but I hope you'll remember the magic you learned with me. She smirked right back, full of arrogance. Sorry, but I'm going to proudly say you're my teacher. You won't be able to live quietly anymore, you know. You're the teacher of the great Dila Catherine Duplain, after all. I was genuinely taken aback by her confidence, but it quickly turned into a soft smile. Her tough act cracked just a little. She stuttered slightly, demanding I take care of myself and not do anything pointlessly dangerous. I reassured her, I'll be fine. Please don't overexert yourself either. Blushing furiously, she declared, I'm already an adult. I can take care of myself now. I reached out and gently patted her head. You don't need to become an adult so early. At those simple words, her eyes instantly welled up with heavy tears. As I turned my back and walked toward the carriage, she hurriedly wiped her face. Derek, she called out one last time. I looked back, and she was waving her hand high in the air, a bright, tearful smile on her face. See you again. I bowed respectfully before stepping away. Let's meet again in Ebelstein, Lady Dila. After a long journey, the familiar sights finally came into view. The bustling noise and earthy smells of the Ebelstein commercial district welcomed me back to reality. Suddenly, the wooden doors of my old tavern burst open with a loud crash. A thug was violently thrown out onto the street, quickly followed by a very pissed-off Pelin, who immediately straddled him and started throwing heavy punches. I chuckled, stepping up casually behind the cheering crowd. That's right, end him, beat him up more. Pelin froze mid-punch, her fist hovering in the air. She whipped her head around, her eyes widening with absolute joy. Derek, I pulled my cloak tight, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Friends, seeing this absolute chaotic mess, I knew I was finally back home. The barkeep slid over my favorite honeymead. He told me it was a welcome back drink, completely on the house. Philanus stared at me, muttering that I looked even paler after bathing in that so-called noble air. The barkeep leaned in, clearly itching for gossip. He asked me to spill everything, joking that he heard I became a magic instructor. I just took a sip and brushed it off, telling him I just got back from work, nothing more to it. But Felinu wasn't having it. She mocked my new refined tone and demanded I actually tell them something. The barkeep tried to calm her down, but she exploded, complaining that she nearly died running all our commissions completely alone while I was gone. Ignoring her tantrum, the barkeep got straight to the point. He asked if the nobles at least paid me well. I smiled, telling him that instead of coins, I received something far more valuable. With a heavy thud, I placed a leather-bound book right on the counter. Their jaws practically hit the floor. The barkeep asked if it was a 2-star magic book, while Felinu started drooling over how insanely rare it was. I looked at them dead in the eye and corrected him. No, it is a 3-star magic book. Cue the absolute panic. The barkeep screamed that I'd get my head chopped off for stealing it, while Felinu yelled that she wanted to steal one too. Seriously, friends, her moral compass spins faster than a top. I calmly explained that the Grand Duke personally gave it to me. Philanu instantly grabbed me by the collar, calling me a liar and screaming to know if the Duke was hiring an archery instructor too. A few days passed, and I was already back at the tavern, flipping through my book and asking the barkeep for new commissions. I told him I was looking for a light subjugation job because my instincts were feeling a little dull lately. He laughed at the nonsense of me losing my edge, assuring me that since they were always short on mages, the work was piled sky high. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. I told him I'd start tomorrow as soon as possible. And just like that, I was back on the grind. We took on everything. One day we were hunting giant ogres and easily taking them down. The next, we were clearing out massive, creepy spiders in dark caves. The relentless pace completely broke Felinu, leaving her throwing up off the side of our wagon. We slept in the dirt by campfires. While I spent every spare moment pushing my mana to its absolute limits, I practiced tirelessly under the night sky, releasing devastating blasts of power into the woods. But no matter how hard I trained, ending up bruised and completely exhausted. Even though I had fully mastered my 2-star spells, the wall to reach 3-star magic was still incredibly high. Seasons changed, autumn came and went, until the dead of winter. We kicked open the tavern doors, shivering and covered in monster grime. Felina complained bitterly about the freezing weather. The barkeep just chuckled, amazed that we actually climbed the Kent Mountains in the storm. He called us idiots for plucking harpy feathers in such brutal conditions. I wiped the grime off my face and thanked him, finally feeling alive again. I told him I was taking tomorrow off to rest, but he immediately hit me with a new commission that just came in, claiming it was tailor-made for me. He smirked, calling it expensive and easy, just a little annoying. It was a job bounced from the Rohill mercenary group on West Street. So the Count Belmyard family. They were looking for a commoner to help with magic sparring. Yeah guys, in simple terms, they needed a human punching bag. The next day, I arrived at the Noble District Magic Sparring Arena. Meanwhile, my client for the day was already complaining. A bald instructor informed the fiery red-haired noble, Lady Elente, that they had procured a commoner for her offensive training. She scoffed, completely insulted that they expected her to just beat up a commoner. The old man coldly justified it, saying I was promised adequate compensation, so she should feel free to practice without any restraint. Wow, the arrogance of these people is truly something else. Elente crossed her arms, sarcastically noting that this training was just an excuse to abuse a commoner because of their noble status. When the instructor assured her I could handle 1-star magic, she arrogantly reminded him that she'd be a 2-star mage soon. Just then, they spotted me on the bench tying my boots. I cleared my throat and looked up. She stared me down, asking if I was her sparring opponent. I gave a slight, perfectly practiced bow and introduced myself as Derek. She introduced herself as Elente, but her eyes narrowed. I could tell she thought she had heard my name somewhere before. She brushed it off and ordered us up to the arena, clearly underestimating me because of my young appearance. Once we stepped onto the sparring grounds, she started stretching. She turned to me and arrogantly asked if I knew the basic etiquette of a magic spar. I kept my face completely blank and told her I was familiar with the fundamentals. She smirked, telling me to resist as much as I could because she wanted to finish this quickly. I could practically hear her internal monologue. She planned to just knock me out of bounds with a simple shockwave to end the nonsense fast. But suddenly she noticed my stance and looked completely confused. I looked her dead in the eye and casually asked how much resistance would actually be helpful to her. The bald instructor shook his head, probably thinking I was suicidal. Elente just let out an amused chuckle. She told me I had a funny way of talking and repeated her order, resist, with absolutely everything I had. I stayed silent for a second. Then, I flared up my blue mana, a massive surge of power wrapping around my hand, and replied, "As you command. Time to show this noble what a real punching bag can do." Immediately, she launched her first strike. A barrage of wind magic surged toward me, while she likely thought to herself how arrogant I was being. She started chanting, determined to make me understand the so-called wall between nobles and commoners. With a heavy thrust, she launched a massive cyclone of wind straight at me. But honestly, friends, it was barely a breeze to me. I stood my ground and deflected it with a casual swipe of my hand. The attack dispersed into a harmless mist of energy with a loud boom. She stood there completely speechless. I tilted my head and calmly asked, "What's the next attack?" Her face flushed red with anger as she realized I wasn't just bluffing. Refusing to accept it, she immediately switched tactics, yelling that the wall between us hadn't disappeared. Dozens of ice spears materialized out of thin air and shot toward me in a blinding flurry. "It'll be over with this," she yelled with absolute confidence. I didn't even flinch. I just parried the point-blank ice spears away with my bare hands. She gasped in pure shock as her attacks shattered into harmless glittering dust against my defense. She stepped back, visibly stressed and losing her composure. I could tell she was bewildered by how a commoner could control magic to this degree. Meanwhile, the bald instructor watched intently, noting to himself that my level of magic was excellent, and the rumors of me being a veteran mercenary were definitely not empty talk. Suddenly, intense flames erupted around her. "I admit that I underestimated him," she declared. "Then this time, I'll attack seriously," she shouted, chanting a massive area of effect fire barrage. I instantly read her play. She wasn't trying to hit me anymore. She was planning to blow away the entire sparring arena. I thought to myself, for a noble, to have this level of adaptability is actually pretty impressive. She raised her hand and brought down a scorching rain of fire arrows. The sky lit up, completely boxing me in from all sides. There was no room to run. I couldn't dodge this, so I didn't try to. I quickly deployed a thick magical barrier. The fire arrows slammed into my shield with a thunderous explosion. A massive cloud of smoke and debris filled the arena, entirely obscuring her vision. But before the dust even settled, I was already moving through the smoke screen. Suddenly, my eyes caught a sharp shift in the mana. She came leaping through the smoke, right above me. She had prepared a point-blank ice spear. At this range, dodging or deploying a barrier was impossible. I mentally praised her insane talent while snapping my fingers to cast my own countermeasure. Instantly, a blinding flash of light consumed the space between us. "Damn it, my eyes!" she yelled in panic, blinded by the sudden burst of light. Losing her balance, she tumbled backward onto the floor with a heavy thud. "Where did that guy go? I can't see anything," she cried out, frantically looking around the empty space. She tried to calm herself down, focusing entirely on her hearing to find my position. But then, a sharp magical projectile zoomed right past her face. She froze, completely confused because she didn't hear a single sound. "Don't tell me," she muttered. That's right, I was using a delusion-type magic that completely erased all sound from the area, launching another silent attack. I kept the pressure on. Guys, did she really think a veteran mercenary wouldn't calculate that she'd rely on her hearing? She finally realized that my first missed attack was a deliberate setup. I could see her getting furious, thinking I was going easy on her. Without hesitation, I threw another volley of silent projectiles. "Not a chance," she yelled, managing to deflect them purely on instinct, her eyes sharpened with pure determination. Seeing an opening, I leaped forward, rapidly closing the distance between us. She actually smirked. "Fool, rapid magic manifestation is my specialty," she gloated. She focused intensely on my hands, waiting for my spell to manifest. She planned to cast faster than me and end it right there, but who said I was using my hands? With a heavy thud, I slammed my boot onto the arena wall. I kicked off, completely subverting traditional magic combat. She gasped, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. Purple lightning sparked violently from the tip of my boot. I manifested the magic directly through my foot and launched a devastating kick. "Ugh," she cried out as the electric shockwave sent her flying. She skidded across the tiles while the bald instructor watched in total shock. The old man noted how my unpredictable school of the wild tactics were nearly impossible for someone trained in regulations to read. Elente sat on the floor, panting heavily. "You," she started. Then she actually smiled at me. "You are seriously an interesting kid." I calmly walked toward her, as she confessed that she initially looked down on me as a blustering liar. We stood facing each other on the ruined arena floor. She bowed her head slightly. "But you taught me something interesting, so thank you," she said. But her eyes were glowing with a terrifying intensity. Before I could even blink, she launched a surprise counterattack, mimicking the exact same purple lightning kick I just used. My eyes widened as I barely threw up a defensive guard. The impact pushed me back as the lightning flared wildly around us. She yelled fiercely, pressing the offensive without giving me a second to breathe. I vaulted into the air to dodge her relentless assault. "Okay, playtime is officially over. This girl is an absolute monster at learning." I glared down at her, gathering a massive amount of mana for my final strike. Her confident smirk instantly vanished. Just then, the sharp ring of a golden bell echoed across the arena as the bald instructor officially called the match. With the spar over, I turned on my heel and began to walk away. Olente caught her breath and bowed respectfully. "Thank you for the match," she said. Afterwards, we relocated to a quiet pavilion on the estate grounds for some tea. She took a sip and smiled. "You're a splendid mage." "No, Lady Olente," I replied calmly. "You're the one with reflexes I've never seen before. Seeing you flatter me like that, you must be pretty used to this world," she noted. "I heard you're a commoner, though. Judging by your skill, you must have honed it through bone-grinding effort." I kept my expression neutral. "I have to survive as a mercenary. Save the humility. I like hard-working people," she chuckled, then lowered her voice. "But that old magic teacher behind me probably won't like you a lot, so don't get on his bad side too much." I glanced back at the bald professor, who was deeply engrossed in a book, completely ignoring us. She set her cup down gently. "Well, thanks to you, I learned a lot. There's another sparring match at the Rosea Salon next time. I might even get a good result." I looked at her steadily. "With your skill, I don't think you have much to worry about." "Well, maybe," she trailed off, her gaze sharpening. "But I'm not interested in small fry. The person I truly want to beat is Iseline Eleanor Duplain." I stayed perfectly silent, processing the name. Realizing she had an audience, Elente waved her hand at the maid standing nearby. "I've prattled on for too long. You may go." The maid quickly bowed and left us completely alone. Elente lifted her tea again, muttering thoughtfully to herself. "Derek of the Belden Mercenary Corps. I think I've heard of his name before." Suddenly her eyes widened as the realization hit her. Sensing the shift in the air, I immediately turned around to leave. Before I could take another step, she lunged forward and grabbed my wrist with an iron grip. She practically yanked me back toward the table. I looked back at her, mildly surprised by her sudden desperation. A massive smirk spread across her face. "It's you, isn't it? The mercenary who taught Dila." By sunset, the conversation had moved indoors. We sat in front of a warm, crackling fireplace. "I'll get straight to the point," Elente declared, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "If I can beat Iseline, I'll do anything." I raised an eyebrow. "You want to defeat Lady Iseline?" "Yes," she nodded firmly. Aislinn still isn't a 2-star mage yet. It'd be best if I reach 2-star first, but if I can't, then I want to beat her at the magic spar this time around at the very least. You've got an incredibly competitive spirit, I pointed out. She scoffed softly. Competitive spirit? What a nice way to dress it up. Sure. Maybe for now you could call it competitiveness. Before, I wanted to beat Aislinn so badly, I wouldn't even hesitate to do something unsightly. I listened quietly, letting her vent. Staring into her teacup, she muttered, "Jealousy is dirty and pathetic. I was jealous of Aislinn. The results didn't turn out well," she confessed. No matter how much I gossiped behind her back and tried to dig up her flaws, Aislinn only tried to understand and embrace me instead. I couldn't help but ask, "Why are you telling me this?" "I wanted you to know my sincerity," she replied earnestly, "even if I had to expose my shameful side to do it. And I have a few things I want to ask." I leaned back. "Please go ahead. If you stayed with House to Plane, you should know well enough how skilled Aislinn is. What must I do to defeat Aislinn?" I carefully set down my teacup. "It's true that Lady Aislinn's skill is at an astonishing level, but you also possess tremendous skill. So if you work hard to refine your abilities," I paused. "Sometimes you can read a person's heart straight from their eyes. And this young noble lady in front of me wasn't asking this because she wanted empty praise. She was desperate. Desperate enough to beg for an answer even from a lowly mercenary like me." A heavy silence fell over the grand room. I looked her dead in the eye and delivered the harsh truth. "You can't beat her." "Even so, I want to win," she demanded fiercely. "Even if it's impossible, I'll win." I stared at her unwavering resolve. "Friends, I have to admit, that kind of raw determination is exactly what I look for in a student." She slammed her hands on the table, leaning in close. "You made that problem child Dila into a mage, so you can make it so I can defeat Aislinn as well, can't you?" I let out a slow breath. "It's not that there's absolutely no method worth trying. But before that, there are things that are bothering me." She crossed her arms, a satisfied smirk returning. "Now we're talking." "What are they?" "Firstly," I warned her, "do you know exactly how I taught Lady Dila?" My mind immediately flashed back to dragging a terrified Dila through the dirt and pulling my heavy blade on her, swinging it down without a shred of mercy to force her mana out. Alente shrugged confidently. "I don't know the details, but don't worry. I'll do anything to win." "Secondly," I continued, "as you know, I'm a mercenary. That means," she scoffed, cutting me off entirely. "That's what you're worried about? That people will talk and they'll sneer that a noble young lady learned magic from a mercenary. But listen, Derek, I'm serious right now. I'm going to become someone whose name will resound across the entire empire. If I can't even take first place in Ebelstein's social circle, that's completely absurd." She jumped to her feet, clutching her chest. "So don't you dare try to judge my sincerity for such a petty reason. I know very well what matters more than pride. Guys, nobles really love making everything about their reputation. I just wanted to talk about my paycheck." "No," I corrected her flatly. "I'm saying you need to pay me because I'm the mercenary." She froze completely. Her passionate speech derailed in an instant. A deep flush of embarrassment rushed to her cheeks. She stuttered quickly, frantically crossing her arms. Money. That's what you meant. Of course, I can pay as much as you want." I smiled inwardly. If she was truly this serious, then I'd reciprocate her sentiment and use my harshest methods to ensure her victory. Well, that's all for today. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and yet don't forget to share and subscribe my channel.